Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Journey and Beyond Untold Stories. Today we have Abhishek Sastri with us. Abhishek is CEO and co-founder of FLUIX AI, a company focused on developing AI-driven solutions to optimize energy use in data centers, particularly through cooling systems. Abhishek has a strong technical background in computational fluid dynamics, thermal analysis, and energy efficient cooling systems, and has gained recognition through awards and successful pitches at high profile events like TC Space Sessions. Welcome, Abhi.
Aryan.
Hi, Abhi. Thank you so much for jumping on a call and welcome to my channel, Journey and Beyond. How's it going?
Doing extremely well. I'm happy to be here. So
Thank
I'm
you.
excited.
So let's start. Let's dive into it. Can you tell us about your startup, FLUIX AI? Here we go. Okay, how did you get started and how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, so at FLUIX, we help data centers save energy. We use AI to control HVAC, lighting, water, IT systems. Throughout college, I had essentially a business building and selling computers. Everybody was mining cryptocurrency, so there was a huge focus on how to cool down your computer. So I got into something PC enthusiasts know as water cooling. We patented that technology, and our business was selling that cooling unit to computer manufacturers. Later, I got to work inside a data center for the Department of Defense. 2023, we had gone through the first startup. Unfortunately, things didn't work out, co-founder troubles and all that stuff. I'm sure we'll get into it. But one thing that we did was we pivoted into what we do now and, found new team members, new co-founder, and essentially got into developing what we do now since January of 2023. And things have been growing pretty quickly.
Yes. And how big is the company now?
We are 7 people. I think by the end of this year, we'll be 10. We have some revenues, some paying customers, MVP. I would say we're seed stage or so. But, stages are quite different, right? Stages in San Francisco will be different from Florida. So,
yeah, fair enough. How has the fundraising process been like for you in the AI space? And what do you think made it easier for you to connect with investors and for them to connect with you?
yeah, I sucked at fundraising. It was tough, right? I think. But I'm really happy with the investors that we have now, and things have been looking up. It was tough in the early days. It was, where we are an AI that is focused on the built environment, so we're part of climate tech, prop tech. But in the early days, I would speak to whoever would give me a few minutes, right? And I think it was the bad strategy. So I think that's why I wasn't that good at fundraising. I got a little bit better because I got to do 3 main things that I focus now, which is, really get to know who the investor is, who I'm speaking with, kind of their dynamics a little bit. Setting the agenda, I think, is really important because really they're investing in you and they're investing in being part of your cap table. And, really understanding that you kind of have to meet the investor here. Most of the times, early fundraisers, if, I went through this where sometimes you'll hop on an investor call and you'll really be, not on the same level, if you will, right? It's a conversation. They're really investing in your business. Money is a commodity, meaning there's a lot of money out there. So I had to break down a couple of things before I finally got to being a successful fundraiser. But even now, it gets tough, right? Things change. But what made us successful is we got to get into the groove of working with investors that understand our space. So it's funny when you speak to an investor out of the data center space, it's difficult. You have to explain concepts that investors in the space would quickly understand, and how well you can explain that concept is incredibly important, right? But when you get an investor that works in your space, they get it, right? So it's learning those couple things. But I would say I'm not that great of a fundraiser. There's much better fundraisers out there. I think I've been incredibly lucky to have the team that I have, and even the success that we've had in some fundraising recently. So, yeah.
How did you create a pipeline of investors in the AI space? How did you started approaching them? Was it through cold emails, or was it like, just striking a message on LinkedIn, or was it asking people for intros?
Yeah, sure. So, being incredibly helpful, whenever you meet with an investor, there's three main things that you're looking for. You're trying to get to the next meeting. So if you're able to get to the next meeting, you move through the process. You're trying to assess a fit, right? But let's say you're not able to get to a next meeting. Even if they get to a no or it's not a right fit, and whatever obstacle or objection that comes about, you're trying to see if you can get a connection to another investor in their network, right? So that's one method that you can try. Now, people might say, hey, it's not recommended if an investor says no that they introduce you to another investor, but you'll figure that out. But you're either going for a second meeting or you're trying to get an introduction to another investor. So that's one way. Third is cold email. I've done a lot of cold emails, and a lot of successful founders. I'm not sure if I'm there yet, but we do a lot of cold emails. But third, it's really part of sometimes you'll be speaking to somebody who's not an investor, but they know five investors. So that's incredibly important, right? So you have champions. So it's a sales process, just like how you would sell a client. But what you're really trying to do is, one, get known in the marketplace, two, see when the deal is hot, and three, get introduced to the right type of investors. One other powerful way, aside from cold email and asking current investors that you're already meeting with, is founders, right? You being a founder, you know this, Shafali. Um, speaking with founders that are in your space or an investor and building relationships with that warm introduction has worked well. But funny enough, the two biggest investors in our current round, um, one was conference. I met them face to face in a conference in our industry, and one was we do quite well on LinkedIn. We post a lot, and it was actually a cold DM inbound from that investor.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah.
Got lucky.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. Like I said, I guess I've been getting lucky, but now it's a different problem, right? Because when you have a fundraise, the first 50% will be tough. The middle portion, will go about. The last 25 or 10% will be even tougher sometimes. So it's really using that momentum and trying to get it, introduced in that one quick shot, which can be difficult because you might lose momentum in the fundraise, you might extend it. But those were some of the ways that we reached out to investors who got introduced.
That's great. Um, so you said that in your first startup you had trouble with co-founder. How in your next startup you went ahead and chose someone, and how did you knew that he or she is the right person, right co-founder for your next venture?
Yeah, so when I met my co-founder now, and absolutely love my co-founder, right? He's my partner in crime. Without him, we couldn't do what we're doing now. But in the beginning, after you go through a phase of, having a falling out with a co-founder, it's hard to trust someone again. So you go through that process as a person and whatever you do to do that. But number one, it's really mission alignment. So you would speak your goals to this person and say, hey, this is where we want to get at. And then you would ask them for their goals. And very quickly you'll figure out, hey, where are we at? And the right way to do it, in my opinion, is they have a goal. We have a goal. How does the overarching goal of the company help each other achieve our own personal goals? And if we can do that, some people call it mission alignment, vision alignment. But if you can do that, what you do is during the tough times, arguments, things that come up, you're able to realign to, hey, what are we trying to do? So that's number one. Number two is really understanding, your strengths and weaknesses. People talk about that. So being self-aware, right? I know my weaknesses. Don't worry, I get a lot of feedback on my weaknesses, so I guess that's good. But every founder does, right? Founder, it's one of those roles where you're out in front and you get hit with the good and the bad. So that's good. So pick to your strengths. But it's always good when you have a technical co-founder, but you can be technical too. And then you are the business founder, and they can be business too. You get what I'm saying? It's very important for that to have a world-class sales, but also world-class technology, and kind of understanding where people fit. What happens is the problems that you had with your other co-founder fallouts, that doesn't happen as much. So it's understanding when to trust someone again, mission alignment, understanding your roles, your strengths, and your weaknesses. And, naturally having those tough conversations early on. Let's say something happens, in my first company, I would not tell my co-founder, "Hey, I'm not comfortable with that, or we shouldn't be doing this." And pretty soon he wouldn't say that with me, and you get that natural divide. But now, at the end of the day, we're running a business. We're trying to do something incredibly difficult. So having those tough conversations up front will save you a lot of pain in the back end. And I really love my co-founder in a way because I'm able to be upfront with him and he's able to be upfront with me, and we're able to have tough conversations. But at the end of the day, we totally respect each other.
That's good.
We understand it's a business. So I think those four main things, understanding to trust someone again, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, mission and goal alignment, and allowing to have those tough conversations is critical for any founder co-founder journey.
How do you resolve conflicts with your co-founder? Because it's bound to happen, right? When you're taking decisions from morning to evening, small or big, so a lot of things goes wrong. How how do you make sure you still stay aligned?
Yeah, yeah. You'll have disagreements, but let's say something. So the first thing, right, where we go back to the mission of why we're trying to get something done. I think this might be a hot take, but I think it's important if someone calls the shots on things. So obviously, my co-founder, he's a CTO, right? So vision on product. I have a certain amount of say on certain things, but at the end of the day, we're both aligned on one mission, which is the customer gets what they want, right? So whenever I come up with an argument on how things on the product side should go, I'm coming in with a customer lens, and he is too. But he's CTO. He's in the code, right? I'm kind of the voice of the customer, so I speak with the customer. So on that end, we understand where we're at. He gets final say. Some of the other stuff on the business stuff, hiring decisions, fundraising decisions, I get final say, but his voice is the strongest at the table, right? So it's having those conversations up front and coming through. You won't agree on everything, but at the end of the day, let's say I lose an argument with my co-founder on product, I can be reserved and I can sleep like a baby at night because I know, hey, that guy cares about the product the most. So if he made a decision that I don't necessarily agree with, I trust that he did his diligence. And let's say I called a shot on taking on an investor or a hiring decision or something on the business end. Even if he loses that conversation, he can sleep like a baby at night, knowing that, hey, that guy cares about this stuff the most. He probably did his diligence. So at the end of the day, it's trusting that. It can be very tough. It doesn't happen a lot. It's having that constant communication, that feedback loop, that constant trust, and that respect for each other. Honestly, we haven't figured everything out, right? So,
One
yeah,
does.
yeah,
Don't worry.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you always want to start a company?
Oh, if it starts with not liking school. I think that's, hey, you got your PhD, so yeah, you're in a different league. But I think for me personally, it started with not liking school, and that's a couple things, right? Not liking certain things I didn't want to do, or and not being conformed in a certain type of way. People talk about freedom. Now, it's a little masochist because if you start a startup, you don't have a lot of freedom, honestly. Like you have freedom in what you want to do, but you have a lot more workload, right? So I think it started with not liking school because it made me understand that, hey, I come from an Indian background. Education is how we make it out, right? It's very, very embedded in our culture. So even just the thing of going to your parents and winning that battle, that, hey, school might not be a thing that I'm going to go fully into. I'm going to go try this thing. It starts small, right? You start selling. I started selling Yu-Gi-Oh cards or trading Yu-Gi-Oh cards, where I got to understand, hey, someone wants something that they perceive valuable. I perceive something valuable. How do I negotiate with them? How do I, make that exchange happen? Then it goes into, I think I was selling video games, and then it went into, what do I like? What does this other person like? And where can that exchange happen? And then it becomes a way of life. And where that really happened for me is high school. I wanted to play video games, but I couldn't afford PlayStations. I didn't want to ask my parents for money. They were very giving, so I'm sure they would have give it to me in either way. But I would start selling candy at school or something to make some extra buck to go do this thing. And what I realized was, hey, rather than me going and asking my parents for something, I could feel a lot more fulfilled, or at least, understand what's going on and learn more if I just try to barter with my friends or try to go sell something and go buy something. And that's where I got to learn about more video games. I got to like be my own person a little bit, have my own identity. And I think that's incredibly important for an entrepreneur to have identity, action, and everything. And then, when I went through high school, my father, who was a PhD in pharmacology, he started his pharmaceutical business with a couple of partners. And things happened. Him and his partners started quarreling about some stuff. But what was interesting is I held that to my own because I saw my dad create something and it was taken away. And that was something that it woke something up in me where I'm like, holy crap, I want to go do something. I want to become someone bigger than myself because my dad was my hero. And maybe if this stuff works out, I can give something back to my father. And that was something where when I look at business, because when he started creating his business, we would go to the business, we would help him out, right? It became in tune with our family. And when that happened with him, I associated myself with like I have to be the person that brings that back to him because I saw how happy it made him to do business, right? So it was a combination of not liking school. It was a combination of I wanted to play video games and kind of figure stuff out by myself. And then when that happened with my dad, I was like, okay, this is the only path for me. So no matter what happens with any startup, I'm always looking at, hey, those three things. I don't want to conform to what's happening. I want to be, have rule over my own destiny. And then if I like something, I want to go learn as much as I possibly can in that space and try to do something new in that space. So I think that's how it really got started.
Yeah. So, as a young founder, how are you handling leadership and what have you learned so far?
Well, some days I'm incredibly opinionated, and some days I'm not. I'm indecisive, right? Um, I think it's being transparent and truth in what you know and being honest with what you don't know. When you're a young founder, there's a lot of things that you won't know or won't how to navigate. What I found incredibly valuable is if I don't know something, I kind of speak it out there. Even if I'm perceived as weak, I'm just like, hey guys, I just don't know what's going on. And in that honesty, you develop a sense of trust with whoever you're trying to engage with, whether it's a team. And in that, they perceive you as honest and truthful, and they build that trust, and then therefore you can move forward, right? So I think being open and honest. Sometimes I'm in a bad mood. It's just who I am. Maybe that's not perceived young. It's just my personality. I kind of wear my personality on my sleeves. That's a good thing or bad thing, right? So being a leader is interesting because if you're showing your emotion in every decision, they kind of know where you're at. So it could be
Mhm.
used against you or used, you know, for a good thing. But at least people know you're transparent and honest. Luckily, I'm not around any sharks that would take advantage of me. No, no, not yet.
Lucky
Maybe it might come.
you.
Yeah, hey, maybe it might come up in the future. Who knows? But then I have team members in place, like my chief of staff, Sriram. He's awesome, right? He'll know certain things. He's got my back and I got his. So in situations where we're dealing with stuff where if someone starts taking advantage of me and he picks it up and he there's certain scenarios that we role play and go into place, right? When fundraising, um, if I forget something, he's got my back. He reminds me what's going on. If I see that someone's not respecting him or something's happening, I got his back, right? So it's really it's just going to sound cliche, but it's really like a wolf pack mentality, right? We trust in each other, we know each other's weaknesses, but the only way we got to that point is us having many conversations
Yeah.
and being honest. Like, hey, dude, I'm gonna be honest with you. I get nervous whenever this question comes up. So we play this scenario where like, okay, let's fundraise, right? So me and him are tag teaming. There's a VC that we're speaking with, and let's say a VC asks about my previous startup, my previous co-founder, and he sees me getting nervous. All right, let's role play that. So we do a lot of role playing, which has been incredible for leadership because I can assess different scenarios with a trusted team member. So one thing I found is like try to role play as much as you can with someone that you trust, which has been incredibly valuable. But I would say those things as a young founder. Speaking about me specifically, uh, I guess, you know, understanding trust, transparency is incredibly important, and hoping that no one takes advantage of that. Maybe someone might, you know, but having the team
Yeah,
members that can get your back if they do.
yeah. I think you're lucky that way then, uh, because often things bounce in your face as well. Have you had any mentors on your journey, and how did they help shape your career? And what's the best advice they gave you?
Yeah. My first mentor was in college. He was an army vet. He was the first entrepreneur I ever met where I'm like, oh, that dude owns a business. That's cool. He taught me he taught me a lot of things. Sales. He taught me discipline. But what he taught me was it's possible, right? He wasn't a perfect human. So even you don't have to be perfect. People think of this entrepreneur thing as like, oh, you have to be like perfect. You have to be like all the entrepreneurs that we look up to, like Musk, Zuckerberg, all those guys. You don't. They're very imperfect people. No matter if you're perfect or not, it's possible. So that's the first thing that he taught me. My second mentor was my first co-founder. Actually, I got to give credit where credit's due. Even if me and him didn't get along, he taught me in a technical sense anything is possible. Two. So the first mentor taught me anything is possible in business. You can be an entrepreneur. This is possible. And my first co-founder, that my second mentor, taught me, and he was a PhD in mechanical engineering, and he taught me anything is possible on the technical side, right? I mean, innovation, right? Anything can be innovated. It's just, have you gone through the life experiences, the trial and errors? Have you tried things? Are you creative enough to figure it out? So my first two mentors, if I were to summarize it now that I'm thinking about it, they really thought possibility that this crazy thing that we're trying to do is doable. And most recently, I have a lot of mentors now that I think about it. People that I bother every day when I have questions. My investors, I'm so incredibly, and I hope they never watch this because it'll go to their head. But I like my investors. I bother them a lot, and I have that trusting relationship with them. Honestly, all of my investors, I like all of them. You know, it's weird, and I'm sure, I hope I don't get any investors I don't like. But right now, any one of my investors, I can pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, dude, I'm dealing with this. Can we figure this out?" Or "Hey, person." And now that I think about it, that's been incredibly valuable. I don't know how it came up that way, but huh, I guess that's
It's
some
nice.
self-reflection.
I'm sure it took a long time for you to get here with your
Yeah,
investors.
yeah. I mean, honestly, there has been some mentors that we've had a falling out. We don't talk anymore, and that's been interesting too because deep down, I'm still like, if I guess sharing a little bit too much. If I were to put my pride in my back pocket, I could say sorry and re-engage that relationship. So maybe that's something I should.
Have you ever felt like giving up on your startup? And what helped you push through those tough times?
Oh yeah, I mean, product fails, you're like, holy crap, everything's going under. You don't fundraise, your account goes to negative. You're like, holy crap, business is done. Many times, right? There's been so many opportunities where we could have gave up. It's funny. I think this comes down to faith. I am a religious person, right? So I rely on my faith. But it also comes down to, I guess I believe all the YouTube gurus. And when they say, hey, it's only done when you give up, right? I think I'm a little too stubborn. So even though I feel like, hey, maybe it's time to call the shots, and this has been many times, product fails, co-founder troubles, account goes to negative, and bill collectors come after you and all that stuff. Right? I'm sure many of the audience members have heard this, but where I was reserved is, okay, let me see my faith. Right? I would go to God and be like, hey, maybe I have to feel useful some way, shape, or form. Right? I got to be useful to society. And my usefulness is really, I think, being creative. And the second thing is creativity, right? As long as you don't lose hope, you still have creativity, and creativity is incredibly important. Every problem has a solution in some way, shape, or form. How much suffering are you willing to go through to figure it out? And you're young, right? No, understanding that not everything is in your control, but the things that you can control is your attitude and how you react to some problems. So if it starts with faith, and then it goes to creativity, and then it goes to how you perceive that problem or whatever you're dealing with, at the end of the day, you quickly come down to one solution, which is, all right, let's not give up. Let's give it one more day. And it's kind of like I've spoken to, I'm going to be honest, I've spoken to a lot of addicts. I'm not saying I'm an addict, but I'm saying if you look at the way addicts function or people that are in rehab, or they take it one day at a time. And it's not the same thing, and maybe it's a bad analogy, but if you're about to give up on your startup, maybe there's one more day you can give it a shot. Maybe things might change. And there has been times when you're about to call it quits, and then 24 hours later, you're like, holy crap, it worked, or we got saved, or someone wired in money. Right?
Yeah. True.
Or your
um,
co-founder gave you a call and he said, hey, we're not giving up. And you're like, okay. And then when he
okay.
says he wants to give up, you're like, you call him and like, dude, we're not giving up. You better show up to work tomorrow. So
Yeah,
it's like, it's
you're
holding each
right.
other accountable. Yeah.
Uh, so building a company can be challenging. What has been your biggest source of support?
Family. I think one thing about my parents is incredibly supportive. I don't know why. They really should be like, hey, dude, go get a job. I remember a couple of years ago, they literally should have been, hey, dude, get a job. And I think having family members that are supportive. I know not everyone out there has family members that are supportive, but my folks are incredibly supportive. And I remember times where you know, I had startup ideas. I gave up on those startup ideas, and then I went to go work. Right, I went to go work for the DoD. I went to go work as an engineer and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But at the end of my at the end of the day, I would call my mom when I was going and working at these jobs, and I would go take long lunch breaks. I wasn't a great employee, so if my old bosses ever find this, but the person I would call is my mom and be like, "Hey, mom, I'm having a tough day at work. I don't want to go sit down in this cubicle, do this thing." And all I could think about is new startup ideas. Hey, mom, I want to go do this, and she would be like, "Well, get that paycheck and invest it in your new startup." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Like, she was supportive of these ideas because I think she acquitted to, I don't want my son to suffer in this job, right? This job causes my son a sense of suffering. And I don't know what it was. It was really cushy jobs. I mean, I was an engineer. I was getting paid well, right? But I
Yeah.
was sitting in here and doing someone else's work that wasn't meaningful to me. And she was supporting and saying, hey, take that leap of faith. And my mom, she takes leaps of faith all the time. She's very, very supportive in that effort. So that now that I think about it, that has been quite valuable. So
That's amazing that you've got such supporting parents though, because not everyone have it. Like,
yeah,
yeah, not everyone has the privilege of having a supporting parents or having anyone to support them. So
it's
yeah,
true. Yeah,
let's start the rapid fire question round. The
sure.
first question is, what's the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Don't give up.
The best decision you have ever made?
Hiring my team, picking the right team members.
What's your go-to productivity hack?
Writing down my goals. I do it every day. Gets me inspired.
What's one trait you think every entrepreneur should have?
Enthusiasm. I think it's important.
If you could instantly learn one skill, what would it be?
Oh wow, paying attention for more than 2 minutes. I think I have the worst attention span.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for watching my podcast video and for listening to my podcast. If you find the content useful, please like, share, and subscribe because it will help my channel grow. So please do that. This is the first time I'm recording a podcast, so please help me out. And if you have any feedback, comment in the section below. Thank you. Bye. Love, love.